Yo, what is going on, everyone? And today I have a different type of video for you guys. As you probably seen from the title, this is definitely going to be how to learn alternate in 5 easy steps. So I see a lot of people when I'm either streaming or in my comic sections, or even somebody like DMing me on Twitter, where like they ask me how do you learn alternate, or what can I do to get better at this control scheme, or like what's the fastest way to learn it. And like I don't really see too many people do videos like this. So I thought it'd be pretty cool to, make a guide, because I think I'm good enough on alternate to figure out how to teach somebody. So we're gonna get started, right? So it's really simple, right? 5 easy steps. So the first thing you're gonna do is make sure you're on alternate, classic alt, and you want to get into a private lobby and just practice bouncing in a hallway. Now, to make this easy as possible, you want to try to find the smallest hallway. So I chose Foundation because this map is really good because it has like all types of hallways, and I'm going to explain why you need that for later. But for now, try to find the smallest hallway possible, and you don't want to start fast, right? You want to start slow and consistent because alternate is, truth be told, all about consistency. Because like bouncing this fast, honestly, like you will learn how to do it, but it's not really that practical. You're not going to get somebody to miss bouncing like this most of the time. So you want to practice slow so you can build your consistency, because what happens with a lot of people is they try to switch to alternate from default or whatever control scheme they're playing, and something like this will happen where they start bouncing, then they will just stop and get stuck, and for some reason they can't move anymore even though they're hitting their A button. And the reason why that's happening is because you haven't found the rhythm yet to bounce slow. So the first step is going to be to find a small hallway and practice bouncing like this. You don't even have to start this fast. You can start this fast if you want to. And this will help get your fingers used to the way alternate feels, because it is definitely a different control scheme from default or even default alternate, because it's not really alternate. So this is going to be the first step, right? Find a nice small hallway and just practice bouncing up and down this, and do this for a while. Actually, like, you need to build consistency. That's the first step, because this is the way I learned. And once you feel somewhat comfortable with this, then you want to try to do two things, right? Try to speed up a little bit and try to stay consistent, because if you don't go to a speed where you can't bounce consistently, like if you can't bounce this fast consistently, you shouldn't be trying it yet. Like, you see what I mean? Like, you build consistency first, then build up your speed, and that way you can use your bounce in actual matches, and that way you won't get stuck and get frustrated on the control scheme as much, right? So once you feel like you're pretty consistent in doing this, you want to try changing hallways. And the way it works is you want to try to use a wider hallway like this. This is wider than that. And what's going to happen is doing this is going to force you to do two things, right? It's going to force you to use your left stick a bit more, or you want to try to use your left stick a bit more, I'd say. And it's going to get you used to the different rhythms of the different hallways, because like the wider a hallway is, you actually have to bounce slightly different to get it to work. And you're going to have to just experiment with this and find out like how you want to bounce in this hallway. But general rule of thumb is the wider the hallway, the harder it will be to bounce. And fortunately in this game, you can bounce pretty easily in wide hallways compared to the older versions of Gears of War, like Gears of War 3, 4. So that's the thing. But still, you want to still practice this, because this is still really important. Just try all different types of hallways, and remember to build consistency first. That's like the biggest thing. Like, out of all the things on this list, this is probably be the second biggest thing you should do, and I'm going to get to the first biggest thing later. But like I said, you want to basically just build consistency, right? Try this hallway, try clutch, that one, and then like the widest hallway you'll probably get on this map is like this. This one's pretty wide, like this section right here. It's pretty difficult to bounce on this compared to some of the other hallways. Like this one over here will be a bit easier, but you get the point what I'm saying. But just general rule of thumb, remember to build consistency first, because that's the most important thing, right? Then the next step you should do once you feel pretty comfortable in doing this, and you feel like you got consistent enough to actually use it, you want to practice what I like to call terrain bouncing. So this is probably not the actual name for it, but I just call it terrain bouncing because you bounce. It's not a hallway anymore. You're bouncing around the map. Like, it's not just a simple left to right movement anymore like this. It's, you have to actively pull off walls and bounce to different areas of the map. And this is going to get you used to actually using the control scheme. Like before, this bouncing through a hallway like this is getting you used to the rhythm and how alternate feels. Bouncing through a terrain is going to get you used to how to actually use the control scheme, because it's not like a simple left right motion anymore. You have to actively like think about what walls are pulling off, how you're going to do it, and this is definitely going to get you better at the control scheme overall. And you definitely want to do this because you want to be able to use your bounce in actual matches, because I see a lot of times where people only practice in hallways, and when they like load up a public match or a ranked match or maybe even a scrim, they will get to a situation where, let me find something, like around here, around open, where they're fighting someone and they're not used to bouncing in an open area that's not just a left or right motion anymore. So they kind of freeze up and they'll start getting stuck because they aren't used to it. So you definitely want to avoid that as much as possible. So I'd say this is a pretty good area, actually a really good area to practice this, because you get to just kind of go wherever you want. You can come here, you can practice doing stuff like this. And remember, the general rule of thumb still sticks. You want to practice consistency first. That's like always, always, always the most important thing. Speed doesn't matter. I promise you it doesn't. You will build your speed up, but it does not matter. So this is going to be the second thing, right? Just practice bouncing like around terrains. And onto the third step, right? So if you got through step 1 and step 2 and you still feel like you're having difficulty, mind you, this takes like hours. Well, it used to take hours in older versions of Gears, but since this game is a bit easier to bouncing, it might come easier to most people now. But for me at least, like steps like these took hours for me. So, and I was having difficulty doing this too. So a really good advice one of my friends gave me is you actually want to lower your sense if you're still having trouble playing alternate, because alternate compared to default has a lot more left stick control over anything else. So like when you're bouncing on alternate, you really want to use your left stick to get around. Like you want to angle your left stick towards walls to actually bounce to them. And when you're doing this, this actually means you don't have to move your right stick anymore, or not as much as before. Like you see my screen's not really moving when I'm bouncing. I can actually bounce without moving my screen at all. And you will learn how to do this too, but it's just like a really, really good way to learn alternate, because especially back in Gal 3 when alternate was hardest to learn, this was probably the main method to learning it, is just switching to a lower sense to get used to it, because alternate becomes a lot easier to control and a lot easier to understand if you are using your left stick to bounce. I thought he lagged out, but he definitely didn't. So this is going to be like, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you feel like you're pretty consistent with it without using your left stick, then you don't have to do this. Or sorry, without using a lower sense, you don't have to do this. But if you are having trouble with the first 2 steps, then this is definitely the way to go, because this will definitely help. And once again, it's always going to stay practice consistency first. Like speed does not matter, I promise you. So the fourth piece of advice is something a lot of people skip, where it's you have to actually go into a public match and use alternate. Because when you just practice in a private lobby, your movement kind of becomes catfish. Like sometimes you would be able to bounce around the map effortlessly, and then the second you get into a public match or a scrim or maybe even a tournament match, you won't be used to actually fighting people with the control scheme. So it will feel like you don't know how to play the control scheme. You'll start getting stuck on walls, and it'll feel like just you're back in step 1. And a lot of people, this is the step a lot of people get frustrated on and actually quit the control scheme when this happens, because they don't understand why, even though they're using it in a public match, it's not as consistent as it was in a private match. And that's just because you haven't actually built reps fighting actual opponents with it. So this is definitely like, this is the 4th step, but this is like really, really, really important. And you definitely want to practice this. You can't skip this, because if you skip this, you won't be able to actually learn alternate. And you don't want that to happen, right? So make sure you actually load up public matches and actually just play around with the control scheme, fight actual people with it, see what you can and can't do, test your boundaries. If you feel like you're still being a little bit inconsistent with it, play a few more public matches. Then what happens, right? You come back to a private lobby and you practice again. Practice terrain bouncing, practice bouncing through a hallway. And the reason I'm lowering my sense like, over and over again is to show you that alternate is all about left stick control. It can actually get to the point where you can bounce on 0, and I'm about to show you that in a second. But you definitely want to make sure you are using your left stick, because I'm on 5 cents and I'm still able to bounce around the map pretty easily. And I can even show you an example of me doing it on 0 cents, which is the slowest sense possible in the game. Alternate is truly all about left stick control. And this is the way to prove it, right? You could probably even bounce in a hallway this wide. Yes, on 0 cents. So it's really all about left stick control. So make sure to remember that. And the final and most important step, and this is definitely the one where you have to listen to me on this one. The biggest reason why people fail to pick up this control scheme is because they quit halfway through. It might sound like really stupid and like cheesy, but you literally can't give up. Because alternate is actually a test of your patience. Like so many people, casuals and pro players alike has come to me to ask me how to play alternate, and 98% of the time this is the step that makes them quit, where they get frustrated, where they maybe can't bounce in a private as much as they want to, or they try to get into an actual match and use it and they simply can't, and then they give up. Because alternate, think about this, right? You learned playing Gears of War on default, or majority of people learn playing Gears of War on default or years on end probably, right? And then now you're switching the way your control scheme works. You're actually switching the way you connect to walls, switching the way your bouncing functions. Like, it's actually pretty hard to get used to it at first. So people will try for like a week, not be happy with the results, and then just give up. Where like if they kept on playing it for like maybe another week or 2 more weeks, then they could almost be at the same spot and same comfortability they were on default. So you just can't like give up. Don't switch off the control scheme. It sounds really cheesy, but I promise you this is the most important step. Like when I say 98% of people has quit this control scheme because of this, like trust me. Like people like always give up halfway through. And it's, in my opinion, it's definitely worth it learning it now, because this definitely is the best control scheme in this game right now. Because it just lets you do the most. So you just have to keep on going, and I promise you, if you follow these 5 simple steps, you will learn the control scheme faster than you expect. With that being said, I hope you have a good rest of your day. And I hope to see you very, very soon. Peace, guys.